I'm just on the Idaho side of the Montana-Idaho border in the Frank Church River and No Return Wilderness. And it extends to my south, the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness to my north, together making up the largest patch of wilderness in the lower 48 states. I'm standing in a burned forest, clearly severely burned forest. And I know that most of your first impressions would be, here he is in a sea of death and destruction. It's probably most people's definition of destruction, but in actuality, nothing could be further from the truth. And what I'd like to do is show you some birds in this forest. It turns out there are some 50 species of birds known to nest in this kind of habitat. Some, like the American robin, nowhere are they more abundant than in this kind of forest. Other species, like the blackback woodpecker, are fairly restricted to these sorts of conditions. It's hard to find them anywhere but in early burned forests. This forest is 2 years old. It's been burned for 2 years. If you look at the trees, it isn't all charcoal here. Underneath this bark is good wood. And what happens is, the trees, after they're burned, they die, they're defenseless. So beetles come in, lay their eggs, and beetle larvae start riddling these trees. And underneath is the good wood that the boring beetles are going to be eating. Woodpeckers then come along, like the blackback woodpecker, hairy woodpecker, northern three-toed woodpecker, and they feed on the larvae in these trees. So this forest can actually be a very rich source for bird watchers. Just behind me here is a northern flicker nest in this broken top snag in old Douglas fir. You can tell it's a flicker because the hole is pretty much perfectly round, about 4 inches across. If it were larger, it would be pileated, and all the others, the three-toads and hairy, are a little smaller, 2 to 3 inches across. Now, what's interesting about this story is that many of these woodpeckers, even the stronger drillers like the three-toads and the hairy, use broken top snags rather than intact top snags in these burns. Twice as many holes are in these broken top snags, snags that were already broken before the fire came through. You can look at the top of that snag and it's jet black. That means it was all burned as the fire went. If it broke after the fire came through, it would be white or very light colored on top. What this means is that these birds depend to a large extent on elements of the forest that are sort of old growth components. You gotta have an old forest with dead trees to provide the nest sites for many of the birds that come in after a burn. There's a flurry of bird activity right now. That's what's fun about bird watching. There can be a hiatus with nothing going on, and all of a sudden, a lot of activity. I hear a lot of pine siskins overhead. They're here taking advantage of the seed crop produced by these cones that have opened after the fire. And just over here against the ground, on and off, oh, Townsend Solitaire. Oh, a Townsend Solitaire is a bird I forgot about here, but with these stream banks and open cuts, that's where they nest, on the ground. A rock will roll out of a little bank, and right in there under a tuft of grass or something would be a Townsend Solitaire nest. That was a bird just went in and out. And I hear some drumming, woodpecker drumming up ahead. I'm not sure, but okay, there's action over there against that tree. Hairy woodpecker. Hairy woodpeckers can look very different in these burned forests. They can have black on the front because they've been rubbing against these dark trees, getting charcoal like that. Amazing. You look through the field guide going, what bird is this? It's a hairy woodpecker. So this is woodpecker heaven in a burned forest like this. More siskin noise, a lot of siskins. Up ahead there's some birds visiting a ravine, probably to get water. Maybe you can hear the water flowing down. Some are siskins, 2 siskins, and there's a Cassin's finch there. I can see the Cassin's finch. It's got a little white stripe right over the eye, very streaked breast. So that's another bird that's here taking advantage of the seed resources. Oh, just down the hill. Unbelievable. Mountain bluebird. Oh, the color. When Thoreau wrote about bluebirds carrying sky on their back, he wasn't looking at a mountain bluebird here in the Rocky Mountains. If he had been, he would have said sky on the back and then some. The color in this blackened forest is outstanding. Sky blue on the front, dark blue on the back. And now that there's a female too, male and a female, the duller brown female and male. This is amazing. So this is a cavity nesting bird that is taking advantage of holes that have been created by the woodpeckers that come in here. So the woodpeckers are the pathfinders that create habitat for birds like the mountain bluebird. This is where mountain bluebirds occur in a natural environment. Most of us think of nest boxes on a roadside. This is mountain bluebird country right here. Just up ahead, I can hear the drumming of a three-toed woodpecker, either northern three-toed or blackback three-toed. Both these species speed up at the end. The only other species that does that is the pileated. It's more like a diving board. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, there, okay. I can see. Oh, this is the hero of our story. Male blackback woodpecker. Jet black on the back with a brilliant yellow cap on top of his head. And I hear a little, very much like a hairy or downy woodpecker, but more drawn out. Hairy and downy, it's cleaner, kind of a, this it's a, so that's the call probably of the female. There's a nest nearby. There's a male on the drumming post. Used to be called a blackback three-toed woodpecker. I can even see here with these 10-power binoculars that there are 3 toes pointing upward. This drumming pattern is a territorial display. It can be heard for acres around the territory of one bird, probably 10, 20, 30, 40 acres for one pair, and other individuals of the blackback species hear this male displaying and keep out of this general area. There is the nest up this Douglas fir tree, 30 feet or so up. I can tell it's the nest hole because the bottom is beveled, or it's not a sharp boundary between the lower edge and the rest of the tree. It's beveled upward. That's characteristic of the northern three-toed and blackback. And there's very faint calling inside the hole, so there are young in there. Both woodpeckers are involved in feeding the young. Now these birds are feeding young. The eggs have already hatched. They sat on eggs. Both sexes incubate for perhaps 2-week period, I believe. Now the eggs have hatched. It'll be another 3 weeks until the young fledge and dive out of that hole, take their first flight. Now we normally think of burned forests as bad events, but clearly they're natural events and critically important for creating an environment like this that's suitable for a species like the blackback woodpecker.